I'm so pleased to introduce Jean Oelwang as president of Virgin Unite. Virgin Unite is the philanthropic arm of the Virgin Group. Jean has been working with Sir Richard Branson for 22 years, and about 10 years ago I had the pleasure of working with her for several years, helping to support the establishment. What she does is she takes Richard's really big ideas and she brings them into the world and to action. She has just recently founded a new organization called Plus Wonder and has an incredible new book called Partnering, which we're going to hear about today, and the importance of relationships. There will be a book signing after the talks finish today before the reception in the lobby of the Limelight Hotel, so we hope you'll join us there. Please join me in welcoming Jean Oelwang.
Firstly, just a massive thanks to Amy and to the whole team at the forum, and also to all of you. How incredible it is to be here in person once again. So a big round of applause for all of you to be in this room right now. And I really believe we probably live in one of the most exciting times to be alive right now. It's almost like someone has smashed a big red button on the wall and the whole world has woken up to realize that the underlying systems no longer serve us anymore. They don't serve our interconnected world anymore. So what an incredible opportunity that every one of us has in this room to reimagine and to reinvent those systems. And it's going to take a level of radical collaboration that we cannot yet even begin to imagine. And I really believe in my heart that that has to start with learning how we connect with one another and how we build partnerships. So I just want to start by asking everyone just to shut your eyes just for a minute. And I want you to think about the beautiful Mr. Rogers question, which is, who has loved you into being? Who has helped you become the best version of yourself? Who has loved you into being? And I want you to hold those people in your heart. And we're going to come back to them. Because I think as human beings, we often live under the misperception that we make ourselves. When in reality, it's the people that we surround ourselves with who make us who we are in this world. And you know, Richard Reed, the amazing co-founder of Innocent Drinks, had a beautiful quote that he said, "We are nothing more than the summation of our relationships." And I really believe that we are nothing more than the summation of our relationships. And you know, the last 17 years, we've been studying deep connections and relationships and collaboration. And what's become really clear is that they are the path to a meaningful life. And we also found that they're the secret to the center of great human achievements. And if we take, for example, the protection of the ozone layer, this was one of the greatest human achievements. And you know, we've been spending the last 6 years talking to everyone we could that was part of this. And we expected to get a science story, we expected to get a political story, but what we didn't expect to get is a human story. And what was incredible at each conversation we had were the deep friendships at the center of this great human achievement. And it all started with these extraordinary two friendships. You have Sherwood Rowland on your left and Mario Molina on your right-hand side. And in 1974, these two scientists from their lab in California found that CFCs, which at the time were in everything, they were in hairspray, deodorants, refrigerators, were actually destroying the ozone layer. And Sherry's wife, Joan, remembers the day that he came home from this exploration, and she asked him how was work. And he looked at her and he said, "Work is great, but it just may be the end of the world." And he and Mario felt so passionate that they had to alert the world to this looming disaster, that they quickly hurried and got an article in Nature magazine. And they expected the whole world to react. And the opposite happened. So they had the 8 billion CFC industry undermining their character, calling them Russian spies. They had their fellow scientists starting to undermine their character. They had speaking engagements pulled out from under them. Doctoral students stopped coming to their classes. And this didn't last for a day or a week or a month. This lasted for a decade. And I was so fortunate to have the chance to talk to the wonderful Mario Molina before we lost him in 2020. And I asked him, I said, Mario, how on earth did you keep going, even though your character was being undermined, your work was being, your whole life was being undermined? And he looked at me and he said one word. He said, friendship. He said, Sherry and I were so close that we were never going to stop until the world listened. And they didn't stop. And he said, Sherry used to say to him, if not now, when? If not us, who? And they kept on going. And then finally, a decade later, probably at the same time that Robert discovered it from his eye color, these three scientists and lifelong friends at the British Antarctic Survey proved that there was a hole near the South Pole. And that mobilized the whole world. And then all these other friendships and collectives of people, like these two extraordinary human beings, Mustafa Tolba, who's a fiery Egyptian diplomat, and also Stephen O. Anderson, who's a larger-than-life character from Utah in the US. They became unlikely friends and became the architect and the implementer of the Montreal Protocol. And you had other unlikely friends and very unlikely environmentalists. You had Reagan and Thatcher. And Thatcher was a skeptic. And then when she had the scientists, some of them from the British Antarctic Survey, convince her that this was an issue, she then mobilized, and she did what Mustafa called start and strengthen. She got country after country to come behind her. And she built this extraordinary platform that we can learn a lot from about making a just transition for the countries that didn't cause the problem. And this is probably one of the best examples that we have as humanity, where we have come together collectively and achieved something extraordinary. Yet oddly, it is absent from our schools, it's absent from our universities, it's absent from our companies, it's absent from our conversations. And I really believe one of the reasons why it's absent is because it doesn't fit nicely into that superhero box we've created. The power here was in the power of the collective, the power of collective friends coming together to literally change the course of history and allow us to sit in this room. And they also, their legacy didn't end there. They also inspired many other Earth scientists, like these three, Johan Rockström, Catherine Richardson, and Will Stefan, who got 28 scientists to create, as Joshua mentioned, this planetary boundaries model. And one of the reasons I love this planetary boundaries model is because the story I just shared, if you look on your right-hand side with stratospheric ozone depletion, that used to be way out in the red. We pulled it back as humanity. We came together across sector, across political divides, across geographic divides, and we pulled it back into the green. And yet still today, we still focus on that superhero myth, even though this is a collective example of where we did something great. And who do we think of when we think of ending apartheid right now? Mandela. An amazing, amazing leader. But my perspective and my lens on ending apartheid in South Africa shifted quite soon after he had passed. We were in South Africa for a celebration of this great man's life. And we were piled and packed into this tiny white tent. And it was pouring rain, so we were soaking wet on our heads, soaking wet on our feet. But there was this amazing electric current of energy in this tent. And one after the other, these anti-apartheid heroes who were still alive got up on this rickety stage, and they paid tribute to this great man. But what was amazing to me wasn't what they were saying on stage. It was how they reacted when they came off that stage, the love that they still had for one another, and that bond. And so I turned to one of the family members of one of these anti-apartheid heroes that was sitting next to me, and I asked her, I said, how on earth did they survive the traumas of apartheid and still have this love? And she said two things. She said, one, they had a purpose to end apartheid, and they were never, ever going to stop. And she said the second thing is that any one of them could have been Mandela. But they chose the role in the collective where they personally could make the biggest difference. So you had Walter Sisulu, who was the planner, Albertina Sisulu, who mobilized the Women's March. You had Archbishop Tutu, who was the rebel riser. You had Leah Tutu, his wife, who was the rock and the foundation in the communities. And then you had the amazing Nelson Mandela, who brought to life this intoxicating purpose. And at the Rivonia trials, He gave a 3-hour speech, and we found the words from the last few minutes of his speech. So I'm just going to play those for you and bring him into the room.
During my lifetime, I have dedicated my life to this struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all persons will live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an idea for which I hope to live for and to see realized. But my Lord, if it needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
And the power of that moment can't be underestimated, and his courage, because at that trial, he was either going to be killed or he's going to be put in prison at Robben Island. And years later, I met one of my heroes, George Bezos, who was one of the lawyers at the Rivonia trial. And I went up to him and said, "Thank you so much for what you did to end apartheid." And he looked at me and he simply said, "No one does it alone." And he said it again, he said, "No one does it alone." Yet from the time we are born, we are taught how to do it alone. We're taught to be the one that gets the gold star, the individual superhero, the top of the class, the top of the company. And I really believe that this push towards hyper-individualism is the root cause of some of the problems that we face and the reason why we can't tackle some of the interconnected problems that we face right now as a world. And I have had the wonderful opportunity, as Amy mentioned, to work on incubating about 18 collectives of global leaders, and Amy's helped with several of those. And one of those was the Elders, a group of global leaders who are working on behalf of humanity and the planet with no other agenda. And sitting at their feet, I was really, really fascinated with how they became who they were in this world. And what became really clear to me is they became who they were because of the relationships that they shaped around them, whether it was their relationships with each other, their family, their friends, who they worked with. And so I became obsessed with two questions some 15 years ago. One was, how do we build these deep connections in our life that help us live and have these outsized legacies of impact? And second is, how do you take those deep connections, like they did with the ozone layer, and ladder them up to solve problems, to have large-scale collaborations? And so I went right to the source some 15 years ago and started interviewing great partnerships of our time. Some of them were friends, some of them were families, some of them were business partners, some of them were larger collaborations. They had two things in common. One was longevity, and two, they had used their partnership to make a much bigger difference in the world. And what was beautiful, almost right from the beginning when I started interviewing these folks, we started to see patterns emerge. And I'll share those in a minute. But first, I wanted to bring their wisdom in the room.
The one will make up what is lacking in the other. And in these parts, we speak of it as Ubuntu. A person is a person through other persons.
A lot of people believe that partnership is 1 and 1 equal 2. It's wrong. 1 and 1 equal 2, you have no added value.
1 + 1 = 3 is when the relationship is perfect.
The goal is not to be better than the other and make a competition. The goal is to be better than what we were before.
It's been a lot more fun doing it with somebody else. Everything in life is a lot more fun if you share it.
During the growth of Ben & Jerry's, I would walk around the company and say, "Oh, this is wrong, that sucks, that's fucked up, don't do that." And he'd be walking behind me saying, Well, what Ben really meant to say was, you know, do this and that. And it was, you know, he could say it in a way that people could hear it.
Choose somebody that you've already worked with before.
If you ask me what I value about Robbie, it would be first and foremost our friendship. We're almost always aligned on major strategic things, big items for the company, because more or less we have this same goal.
You need somebody, you know, poking the fire and saying, you know, this isn't as good as it could be.
That kind of tough love advice is pretty welcome when it happens.
Give each other plenty of space, even you're going to be different people.
And he always listened to me. He didn't always react the way I wanted him to, but he always listened to me.
We complement each other rather than being echoes of each other. It does require compromise and hard work. It has to be grounded.
You mean hard work?
We are friends before we're partners.
A lot of it's just about trust. You know, I think Ben and I just completely trusted each other.
You've always pushed me to do things that I thought maybe I couldn't do. Often I'll be in a situation, I'll think, what would Sev do? And then it's like, okay, I can do this.
Wow, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's so great.
I am a movement by myself, but I'm a force when we're together.
It feels right, and it feels like it's what we were always meant to do.
I think we have a shared passion for improving the world around us.
As you can see, it was so much fun talking to these incredible partnerships in the world. And as I mentioned, these incredible patterns came out in what we call the 6 degrees of connection. And we don't have time to go through them today. I'm super happy to talk about them with anyone that's interested, because we want to create this relationship reset. We want to move the world from being hyper-individualistic to back to being hyper-connected. And part of that is redefining our relationship with Mother Nature, because I really believe when we destroy the wonder around us, we destroy the wonder between us. And this incredible, beautiful horseshoe crab, blue blood, is able to detect contaminants. And so they have been part of pretty much any injectable drug or medical product that we have in our bodies, including the COVID vaccines. Yet we're still destroying this incredible creature. And so just to close, I guess, you know, I was in this session probably a few years ago now, and we were talking about climate change, and this amazing young woman stood up and she raised her hand, and she talked about that quote that's frequently used where she said, if we want to go fast, we need to go alone. If we want to go far, we need to go together. And then she went on to proceed to say, climate change is so urgent, we need to go alone. And I believe that is so deeply misguided, and that quote is misguided, because certainly over the last 16 years, what has become clear is that the only way we're going to go far and fast is if we go together. So just a couple things I'd love to leave you with. One, to go back to those people in your heart who loved you into being, and just take an old-fashioned piece of paper and pen and write them a letter of gratitude. Because we spend so much time planning our lives, staying fit, eating right. We spend very little time giving gratitude to the people who make us who we are in this world. Second, look around you over the next few days and make sure you leave with at least 2 friendships that could create a deep connection that will change the course of your life. And thirdly, ask yourself this question about who and what will you love into being? What kind of collectives can you create that can change the course of history? Because my gosh, we need all of you more than ever in this world right now to do that. So thank you.